Alright, welcome to our weekly update on the global property market, where we discuss waves, impulsive waves and corrective waves around the world. I'm getting bombarded with tweets about popping property bubbles. First, it was Canada, undergoing a huge correction. Now it's Germany losing 10% from its peak. As I've been saying, we are at the very end of a huge cycle that was spanning over the last 50 to 70 years. In case of Germany, it started after the Second World War. Wave 3 peaked in 1982, followed by a 3 decades long correction. Finally, the monetarily and fiscally prudent Germans decided to catch up with the rest of the Western world, and within 1 decade pumped up a huge bubble that started the final fifth wave of this huge cycle. Why is it important? Because it's the final wave. There's no wave 6 or 8, only the ABC formations down, like it takes place in Japan and Italy, who have been declining for decades now. We are ending this cycle, baby, which is a monumental development, as we are probably ending an age of prosperity. There's a lot of political interest in keeping this bubble going, to keep an illusion that everything in our economy is going fine, that there is no recession per capita, that the wealth is collectively not declining. People would be up in arms if they have found out that the pie has been shrinking for decades now, and that only the indices like the housing index, cooked up unemployment figures, and inflation figures allow central banks and politicians to keep spinning the plates. We have pumped up so much liquidity into the system, which collectively impoverished us all through the inflation tax. The only reason why people can afford to pay for overinflated houses is because of banks willing to lend out the funny money that are created out of thin air, that get wiped out once you pay off your loan. What if you can't pay it off? Someone has to cover those shorts. And it's usually the taxpayer who is going to save those loans and the banks that lend it out, as they are being considered too big to fail, or systemically important. So the crucial question is, are we there yet? And have we reached the peak of all peaks in Germany? My answer is not yet. Don't get distracted by huge drops of 10 or 15%. Remember that during the pandemic, central banks panicked and pumped in trillions of dollars, fueling housing markets by 20 to 30%. Usually such huge increases are followed by spectacular drops, proving the fact we are at the end of the cycle, where such fluctuations are a commonplace. As per my video from the 3rd of October, we can see that on the housing index we have reached the peak in fourth quarter of 2021, which seems to take into account all major cities that peaked around that time. So while all German cities present huge drops, here's Frankfurt, Munich, Cologne, Leipzig, Stuttgart, Hamburg. The only exception was Berlin, which happens to have the most up-to-date and robust data. The chart starts in 2007, at the end of the major third wave, followed by a short-lived correction that ended in 2011. Ever since, we experience a continuous increases in house prices with very subtle corrections that can be spotted if you count the waves. That's how I managed to establish that over the past decade, we have been pumping the third wave and now are undergoing the correction corresponding with wave 4. It's hard to tell whether we've hit the bottom yet. I'd say it's going to be a prolonged wave 4. Therefore, we should expect more drops ahead, as the stock market is about to flip and the US bond yields are about to skyrocket for the final showdown. So I would project another ABC drop, which should finish off this correction and start the final fifth wave. Where from here? We are definitely going to break the last high from December 22, which could happen around the end of 2024. Another short correction, and sometime around the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 2025, we might end the cycle. Obviously, it's not written in stone, but it seems that all waves tend to peak on the last week of the year. On the other hand, wave 1 of the fifth wave lasted 4 years. If we use it as a guide, we should expect this market to peak in December 2027, which is highly doubtful as the German market is going out of its way to catch up with the rest of the world in house prices. My guess is all housing markets are going to follow the American cycle and crash all at once, as they seem to be working in unison. So as per my analysis of the American market, I have worked out we should peak between year 2025 and 26, which perfectly corresponds with the German tendency to peak in December. Only time will tell. If you look at particular postcodes, the situation in Berlin gets repeated. I've picked districts with the most significant drops. The repeating pattern indicates that they might be hitting the bottom soon, but that remains to be seen. They are reminiscent of the Toronto's housing market, which seems to be at the same spot in a cycle, which I often point out on my Twitter account, where I give updates on where we are sitting in a cycle on multiple markets. Australia, on the other hand, hasn't experienced such drops yet, as we are behind the curve on the interest rate hikes. We are going to get there soon. So to summarize, it's an ugly scene out there in Germany. So is the USA and Canada. But you've seen nothing yet. It just proves that interest rates are a primary cause of price action in the housing market. We have to muddle through the final wave in bond yields before we see the first drops in interest rates. Once that happens, inflation is going to go through the roof, so will house prices. Hence, you should expect more house price increases over the next year, until you find that inflation hits double digits. That's when all bets are off. And as double-digit interest rates ensue, so goes the ability to make repayments on million-dollar mortgages, which will end the big cycle in housing all around the world. A lot of water will pass through by this time, so stay calm, follow my updates, and count waves.